That song that we just sang makes some pretty bold claims about how good that God has been to us, about how deeply He loves us, recklessly, I like to use the word lavishly, about even that God pursues us. Do we really believe that that's who our God is? Do we really believe that we have a Father in heaven who loves us that powerfully? Do we live our daily life as though we are loved like that by our Father in heaven? I think maybe sometimes we struggle to really believe, to really understand that God is a loving Father and that He is this involved in our life. Because sometimes our circumstances suggest that God loves us. Sometimes we look around and we're like, oh, things are going really well right now, and my family's doing well, and I'm doing well at work, and God, God really loves me and He really blesses me. And then sometimes we look around and we're like, I just got a bad report from the doctor, or maybe somebody around me is really sick, or maybe my house didn't sell when I thought it would. When I thought about this sermon, I didn't know I was going to talk to myself. But, sometimes we look at these things and we're like, I don't know where God is. Does God really love me? It doesn't seem like He's that involved. And we kind of play this, He loves me not game in our head. And we try to look around us and figure out, what does the evidence show? Do we really believe that this is who God is? Sometimes our circumstances make us doubt it. But the truth that we need to understand is that God is not a moody God, a schizophrenic God. His love for us doesn't change from one day to the next. It's not that one day we're doing really good and He's like, oh, look, they've been to church every week this Sunday, and they're tithing, and they were kind to their neighbor, and I just love him so much. And then the next day He's like, they knew better than to do that, and they're still sinning over and over. They're still falling into that same trap, and they're not getting out of it, and I'm just sick of it. That's not who God is. God is a God who loves constantly. God is a God who loves us without change. It's our perspective that changes. So this summer we're going through these Bible blockbusters. We're looking at parables that Jesus told. Last week, I just barely squeaked in there with kind of a metaphor that I tried to make into a parable. So this week, I'm going to go whole hog the other direction. We're going to take probably what is Jesus' longest parable with the most detail. And we usually call it the Prodigal Son. But it's not a very good name for it. It really should be maybe the parable of the two sons, or the parable of the amazing father. Maybe that's my favorite. Going with our theme of, summer blockbusters, we can call it Back to the Father. And that's what we'll go with. But it's one of, the most famous parables that Jesus told. And of course, leading up to it, Jesus was teaching, and He was in the crowds, and there's those pesky Pharisees. And they're over there kind of muttering to themselves. And they're not even sure that, Jesus can hear them or not, but they're saying, this man welcomes sinners and eats with them. And of course, they're coming from this perspective. It's very legalistic. Very, they have a very strict line between who they would say is clean and unclean in a ceremonial way. They have this very, differentiation between people who are acceptable to God and who are not acceptable to God. And so what they're trying to argue is, if this man claims that he is this righteous leader that's come from God, he should know better. He should differentiate the way that we're differentiating between people, and he shouldn't spend time with those sinners. He should focus on the people that are righteous. He should focus on us. And that would be a sign that he's really from God. But of course, we know that Jesus and the Father are one. That if we want to understand who the Father is, we look to Jesus. And so, from that perspective, then, what they're really saying is, how can God's love be freely available to people who aren't even working as hard as they possibly can to please Him? How can the God of the universe consort with sinners? How can God love people who aren't worthy of it? And of course, Jesus does hear. He knows what they're saying, and he responds to them. He tells 3 parables. And the first one is that parable of the lost sheep. Shepherd has 100 sheep. He counts them at the end of the day, and there's only 99. So he leaves those 99 to go out and find the one that he lost. And he finds it, and it's really the cute little lamb, and its name is Lambkin. It's a sweet story suddenly. He puts it over his shoulders and carries it back and rejoices because he has all his sheep. But it shows, that God cares about, even if he's got most, he cares about even the one that's lost. And then he tells the story, we call it the story of the lost coin. The woman has 10 coins, and she goes to count them, and she's only got 9. And she stops everything, and she sweeps her whole house and looks everywhere and every nook and cranny until she finds that lost coin. And then she calls all her friends and neighbors and wants to party, and they're like, what are we partying for? A coin? Really? But really it shows again, each one is valuable. Each person is valuable. It's not simply a matter of getting those that are easy, of getting those that fit the bill, getting those that are trying really hard. It's about getting every single one because God loves every single one. And then Jesus winds this whole thing up with the story of the 2 sons and their amazing father. So let's look at Luke chapter 15 this morning and see how Jesus tells the story. Starting with verse 11. Jesus continued, there was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, Father, give me my share of the estate. So he divided his property between them. Not long after that, the younger son got together all he had, set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth in wild living. And after he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in that whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country, who sent him to his fields to feed pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. And when he came to his senses, he said, how many of my father's hired servants have food to spare? And here I am, starving to death. I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants. So he got up and he went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him and ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. And the son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his servants, Quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring a fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. So they began to celebrate. Meanwhile, the older son was in the field. When he came near the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of the servants and asked him what was going on. Your brother has come, he replied, and your father has killed the fattened calf because he has him back, safe and sound. The older brother became angry and refused to go in. So his father went out and pleaded with him, but he answered his father, Look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never gave me even the young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, who squandered your property with prostitutes, comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him. My son, the father said, you're always with me. Everything I have is yours. So we had to celebrate and be glad, because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and he's found. So the story starts off, of course, with the younger son who wants his inheritance now. And you got to think about how shockingly insulting that would be. How would you respond if your young 20-something son came and said, I don't really care about you. I just want your stuff. I've just assumed you were dead so I can go ahead and inherit what you have. That's basically what he's telling his father. I wish you would go ahead and die because I want your stuff and I don't care about you. And so what's even more shocking, though, is that the father gives it to him. What kind of a father does this? I mean, if one of our sons did this, would we give him the inheritance? Of course not. We'd start talking about tough love, right? We'd start talking about how he needs to be more responsible. We'd sitting down and giving that lecture about responsibility, about maturity, about good old-fashioned hard work. Maybe we'd even give him more chores or help set him up with a job and would stop giving him free money and say, you've got to learn. And of course, it's coming from a good place because we know how difficult this world can be. We know that it can be cruel, and we want our children to learn how to stand on their own 2 feet. And we know sometimes we have to be tough, and they may think that we're being cruel, but we have to say, you've got to toe the line. You've got to straighten up and fly right, or you're not going to make it. And we know that that's what they need so that they can leave and get out on their own and be successful in life. So what's this father doing? Dividing up his inheritance and giving it to the son that he knows is going to squander it. The mere fact that he even brought this question up shows that he's not ready to handle it. Unless maybe his father wants something different than for his son simply to learn responsibility and maturity. Perhaps he has a greater purpose. And really, maybe that's a picture of what our Father in heaven has already done. Maybe that's what God did in the Garden of Eden. He created this wonderful, beautiful world. And he created man and he created woman and he put them in this garden and he said, here, this is all for you. Here's the keys. Take care of it. Isn't that what he did? Didn't God know that Adam and Eve and all the rest of humanity would blow it? Didn't he know what we would do with the gift that he was giving us? Of course he knew. Sometimes we wonder, why might God even give them the choice in the first place? Wouldn't it have just been better if we had all simply been made to serve him and obey him and there had been no possibility of sin? Or once Eve was tempted by the serpent, wouldn't it have been great if God had just popped out from behind a bush and said, whoa, 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 think about what you're doing? But God didn't do that. He allowed them to go ahead and make their choice. Unless maybe God wanted something different. It's simply for us to live in obedience. If there's some greater purpose for our relationship with God than simply to please him, to do what he wants, to toe the line. So this young man, he takes his wealth, starts flashing around, right? Goes off to this distant country, lives a wild, wild life. We don't really know exactly what he did. Older brother says prostitutes. That was his take on it. At any rate, he doesn't use his money to invest and start a business. He doesn't start to make more money. He doesn't get himself set up. He's living like a trust fund baby. And he's having a great time, assuming the money's never going to run out. And then all of a sudden, it does. There's a famine in the land. There's a recession. And his money is gone, and his friends are gone, and everything is caught up with him. And he takes this job feeding pigs. Not a very enviable job, especially for a young Jewish man. Not a lot of demand for it in Jewish lands, but he's not in his Jewish lands anymore. He's gone to another culture so that he could live life without being bothered. But now here he is with these pigs, and he realizes these pigs have it better off than he does. He finds himself imagining dipping his head down into that pig slop and beginning to share their meal with him. And this is kind of an interesting situation because we all know he's reaping the consequences of his actions. We don't really feel sorry for him because we know that he's getting what he's got coming. We know that he's put himself in this situation. His things have gotten so bad because he was so rude to his father, because he took everything and wasted it, because he was living wildly and didn't have any responsibility. This is kind of that tough love thing again, right? He needs to learn somehow. But then at the same time, we kind of identify with him at some level, because we understand that we have rebelled against our Father in Heaven's plans for us as well. We realize in some way that we're like this young man. We realize that living in rebellion to God is not a good place to be. But at some time it felt like, or it looked like, it was. In some way it looked like there was another life out there that was going to bring satisfaction, that was going to bring happiness, that was going to be the good life. And suddenly, at some point, we begin to realize it's a lie. That there's not a good life out there that's separated from God. That really it's only pain that's masquerading as pleasure. Or there's God's loving embrace on the other side. And at some point, we realize that truth. And we begin to realize that really all that was out there without God is just pig slop. And no matter how good a spin the world puts on it, living rebelliously against God, turns out that we're just settling for pig slop. And yet the weirdest thing is that somehow pride will keep us eating that pig slop and denying that it is what it is. Because somehow we're not ready to give up. We're not ready to give back in to the Father. We're not ready to admit that He's a loving Father. We're still looking at Him somehow to just punish us, or somehow to find our way without Him. Well, this loving Father, He gave the Son this inheritance, and He let Him do this, and He knew that that's what He was going to do. Father in heaven knows what we're going to do. So it seems like His plan is kind of risky. I mean, what if He gave the Son this inheritance, and the boy did something with it? Maybe he went out there and he became a YouTube star, or, whatever it is, got one of those, lucrative playing video games jobs. And somehow he's able to make it. And he never has this feeling that he needs to go back to the Father because he never feels that need. It's risky. Or what if he fell so far down that he couldn't get back out? What if that wild life and then the consequences consumed him? And there wasn't even a point where he could reach back out to the Father. Or what if his pride and his rebellious spirit were just too strong and I'd rather eat pig slop than go back to my Father? We've all known people that fit into all three of those categories. It seems that the Father's taking a risk in order to teach this Son this lesson. But of course, this Son does come to his senses. I don't think he has any idea still how much his Father loves him. But he starts to realize things were better there. He starts to realize, life was better even as a servant than what he's got going on. So he comes up with this grand speech, right? I'm going to go back to my Father. I'm going to say, I've sinned against heaven and against you. And I no longer deserve to be called your son, but please just make me one of your servants. When he works on it, he rehearses it over and over. He knows exactly what he's going to say. And slowly he begins to walk back towards home. And we don't know how long this boy was away. It seems like maybe it was even a few years. And yet, when he's still a long way off, the Father sees him. And I thought about this a little bit. When I was a little boy, my father was a pastor, and we lived in a parsonage. So it's just this house. It's behind the church, 150 yards or so. And we had this big picture window. And I remember when I was little, and it would kind of be late afternoon, and I would be thinking, my dad's going to be coming home. And I would start to watch out that window to see him coming. And, I'd do other things, and it wasn't like you could look at the clock and know exactly when it was. So I would just keep coming back by the window and checking. And every once in a while, he would catch me unawares, and he would be home, and I didn't see him. But the best days were when I managed to see him when he was still a long way off. And get to watch as he came all the way to the door, and get to be excited and thrilled as he came to the door. I kind of imagine that's like this father watching for his son. It's like, yeah, he's got to go about his life. He's got to go about his business. But he's constantly looking over his shoulder. He's constantly looking in the direction of that driveway. He's constantly looking to see if his son is coming. And apparently this goes on even maybe for years. But he's anticipating the return of his wayward son. And yet you know this has got to be the most miserable walk in the world for this young man, right? He's walking humiliated, in rags, apparently not even any shoes on his feet. And as he comes back into the country that he knows, and people that have known him begin to see him, it's got to be nothing but shame, nothing but humiliation. Everybody knows what's happened. Everybody can see looking at him that he's blown it. And you know they stopped and they stared. Maybe there were some catcalls. Not such a little rich boy now, are you? How is it is this how your rich friends are dressing these days? If I had known that rags were in, I could have gone to the party too, you know. It's a walk of shame. But everybody knows it's necessary. Nobody's really feeling sorry for this boy even now. Because it's still just that rebellious punk kid getting what he's got coming to him. Except the father sees it. And the father breaks through his door and starts running down the street towards his son. Now this is not something like what we would imagine today, because to us, runners are esteemed. We see people running, we see men running along the side of the road all the time, right? Special gear, sometimes special running clothes, special shoes, maybe wearing less than we'd like, but still it's an accepted part of society, right? Runners are esteemed, but not so in first century Palestine. Men did not run. It wasn't dignified. I wonder how many of us have ever tried to run in a long skirt? I have not. But I can't imagine it's very easy. And so what he would have to do is take the hem of his robe and hike him up and hold him at his thighs so that he could run. A very undignified position to be in. Very shameful. In fact, so shameful that the onlookers would have turned their attention away from this young man and begin to stare at the father instead. The father doesn't want the son to suffer any more shame than he already has. But that's not how most of us fathers might handle it either. You know, a little humiliation might do a little character. You want to make sure that they really learned their lesson. Maybe they even need to do a little grovel. But this father, he runs out. And he takes this boy's public shame on himself. And all the people are watching him, and he runs and he hugs this boy who's dressed in rags and filthy and probably smells, and he kisses him and he holds him tight, and he's filled with compassion. And the servants are there too. Probably they've come along to watch the spectacle, see what the master is going to do with this rebellious boy. But the father turns to them and he says, "Quick as you can, go. Get a robe, get some sandals, get a ring, clean him up, get him all dressed up like a prince. And then go throw some steaks on the barbecue, and let's have a party." And the son, he's trying to get this rehearsed speech out. "Father, I've sinned against heaven, I've sinned against you." And the father's not even paying attention. He's just moving ahead. My lost son is here. Let's have a party. Let's celebrate. He's not acting like anybody we've ever known. Because his son, who might as well have been dead, is alive again. Do you think this boy is starting to realize how much he's actually loved? Is he starting to get it? Does it dawn on him as he's sitting down that night to eat and drink, and people are dancing, and there's a celebration and a party all around him in his honor? Does he start to believe his father loves him in spite of his rebellion? Does he grasp with his father wants more than anything is a loving relationship with his son? a relationship that can only occur if the Son reciprocates. Is this why Jesus welcomes sinners and eats with them? But then there's another boy. There's an older brother. We like to stop the story there, and we don't pay as much attention to this guy. He's been here all along. He's been working faithfully in the fields. He's the dutiful son. He's doing everything right. And I wonder if as Jesus got to this part of the story, if he stared right at those Pharisees, locked eyes with them as he began to talk about this part of the story. The older boy comes in from the fields and he sees that there's a party going on. And he doesn't even go in to find out what's going on. He calls one of the servants to tell him, to inform him, your son, your brother has come home. And your father's excited and he's killed the fatted calf and there's a party. And it's all great. But the older brother, he gets angry. And he refuses to go in. He doesn't want to have any part of this redemption. He doesn't want to have any part of this eating with sinners. His father is not acting the way a father should act. This boy should be suffering, not having a part. But once again, the father undignifies himself. Because he comes out to his son. He doesn't say, well, if he doesn't want to come in, that's his problem. He doesn't wait for the son to come to him and address this. He goes out to his son and he pleads with him. He begs. He puts himself in a humble position in order to try to help his son understand what's really happening here. And the boy doesn't want to listen to it at all. He's worked all these years. He's done everything that the father could possibly want. He's slaved after what the father would want done, never disobeying. He's been a perfect son. And now he accuses his father of never letting him celebrate. Never even let me have a young goat and have a party with my friends. But remember back at the beginning of the story, when the young son wanted his inheritance, it actually says the father divided his inheritance between the two. It's not that he kept his inheritance, he gave the inheritance to the younger son and he kept the rest for himself. He divided the inheritance between the two. That means once the younger son has taken his share and squandered all of it, everything that's left really belongs to the older brother. It's already his. The father has already given it to him. He can do with it. He can celebrate. He can kill the fatted calf. He can invite his friends over. He can have a party. He has held himself back from the enjoyment that he could have in life because he's chosen instead religion. One brother chose rebellion and the other chose religion. And I know Jesus is staring right at these Pharisees as he says this. Because they're refusing to come together with these sinners that Jesus is welcoming. And Jesus is saying that their attitude is really a symptom of a bigger problem. Because they've had the opportunity to have a relationship with the Father all along. All along they've known who God was, or they've had it right in front of them, and they chose not to believe. All along they could have lived in this wonderful, lavish love of the Father, and they've chosen instead rules and religion. It kind of reminds me of the church in Revelation that God says is lukewarm. He says he would rather have people who are cold or who are hot. But if they're lukewarm, he's going to spit them out of his mouth. The younger brother has been cold, and the consequences that he has endured have brought him back to the Father. But this older brother is lukewarm. He's missing out on what it is that the Father wants him to have, and he's never getting to a place where he even realizes what he's missing. He's just going along in life. He's working as hard as he can, and he thinks somehow, someday, it's going to pay off, but he doesn't realize that the payoff is right there in front of him. It's kind of like this. There's a story. Man dies, goes up to the gates of heaven, and St. Peter's there. And the man walks up to Peter and he's like, all right, I know how this works. How many points do I need to get into heaven? And Peter kind of gets a little grin and he says, well, you need 100 points. And he said, all right, let's see. All right, I was a really good, honest businessman my whole life. I never cheated anybody. I was really honest, really got a lot of integrity. And Jesus says, okay, that's 1 point. 1 point? All right, well, let's see. All right, well, I was a member of the church for years and years and years. I brought my family to church. We did volunteer, did all the things we possibly could. He was like, all right, there's another point. And it's like, well, how am I ever going to get to 100 at this rate? What am I doing? It's like, all right, think. He's trying to think, all right, I can get 1 more point for this one. I'm never going to get to 100. And he's standing there and he's so frustrated. And he sees another man walk up. He says, hey, Peter. Hey, come on in. He's like, why did that guy get to go in? He didn't even have to come up with points. Peter said, he's not playing that game. There's no game, there's no point system to come into the presence of God. God's done it all. He's taken the shame of our sin upon himself. He's taken the punishment of our sin upon himself. He's paid the price. He's removed all the barriers. He says, just come in. Just have a party. Just know me. Just trust that I love you and that I'm holding you in my hands. And I think sometimes we Christians read this story and we nod our heads at the way that Jesus spoke to these Pharisees and the religious leaders. But in some ways we're not really a lot different. I mean, maybe we don't follow the law of Moses, but sometimes we replace it with our own set of rules. We come up with our own, point system. Things that come between us and God. Or we come up with all kinds of rules that we expect each other to conform to. And we start to look at other people and say, why would God accept them? Why would God welcome and eat with those sinners? We want them to be good Christians like us. And we get caught up in our own little point system. And the interesting thing here is that as Jesus finishes this parable, he doesn't give a conclusion. He leaves this older brother standing outside of the house with a decision to make. Is he going to march off mad and continue with his life the way that it's been? Or is he going to accept this good news of lavish love and go into the house and celebrate and welcome his younger brother? We don't get to know what he does. That's the decision that's before him. So now, just looking back to this whole parable, I wonder what we would say, at what point in this story is the Father's love the greatest? Anybody? At what point is the Father's love the greatest? Is it when he welcomes the younger son back? When he let him go? When he goes out to talk to the older son? It's kind of a trick question. Because really, his love is constant throughout the whole story. In fact, the Father's love is the only constant that's in this story. What changes, what causes the turmoil, what moves the story along, is the two sons' perception of that love. The Father loves through the whole thing. He's always available. He's always right there for them. But they don't perceive it. Both sons thought at times that they were loved less than they really were. And that's what led to their actions. The younger son thought that he was getting the best the world had to offer if he left the father and lived wildly in a different land. But that was really because he had a perception that he was less loved than he really was. The younger brother thought perhaps that he could get back into his father's house as a servant, but certainly not a son, because he thought he was loved less than he really was. The older brother worked hard all the time trying to win his father's approval because he had a view of the father of loving him less than he really did. But the Father loved them both completely throughout the story. And that's the picture of the Father that Jesus is trying to present to his listeners, that he's trying to show us today. The Father's actions were meant to reveal love to His children, that they might learn to love Him in response. And the same is true in our lives. God's love is the constant. God's love doesn't change. God doesn't get moody. God isn't schizophrenic. God loves us completely, fully, and always. Sometimes it's easier to see than it is at other times. Sometimes our circumstances reflect it, and sometimes they don't. Sometimes we feel it, and sometimes we don't. And what's changing is our perception. And most of the time, I think we live our lives as though we're less loved than we really are. When we worry that if we're faithful to God, He's going to demand too much of us, we live less loved. When we indulge ourselves in sin, we're living less loved. When we give into worry and anxiety and the crush of our circumstances, we're living less loved. When we get caught up in religious obligations, trying to do all the right things in order to make ourselves acceptable, we're living less loved. Do we know how loved we really are? How can we learn to live in that love instead of away from it? Let's pray. Lord Jesus, this story that you told us so many years ago presents a picture of a loving Father that is hard for us to fathom. Because, Lord, we see things through the eyes of sinners. We see things through the eyes of those who live in a cruel and unforgiving world. We see things through the eyes of those who would not love, would not forgive, would not humble ourselves in the way that this Father in this story does. But Lord, you present this truth to us that this is who our Father in heaven is. That though we are wayward sons and daughters, that you are watching and waiting for us to come running back, to wrap us in your arms, to throw a party for us, to welcome us in. And though some of us are working so hard to try to make ourselves right, acceptable, good through our own efforts, Lord, that you are also here, even pleading with us to let down those pretenses, to come into the party, to come back to our Father. Lord, help us to understand, to fathom, to accept such a lavish love beyond what we can comprehend. That's the love that you pour down on us. Lord, help us to understand those steps of living each and every day as though we are loved completely and fully and constantly by the God of the universe. These things I pray in Jesus' name. Amen.